Hey Dom, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, pretty good, pretty good. Getting ready. It's almost getting ready to rain here, so I'm hunkering down with a book.
Oh man,
Just doing some reading on a rainy. What is it? Wednesday night.
I know we got to remember the nights here.
It's throwing me off. Well, tomorrow's my Friday. We don't have school. We have our snow makeup day on Friday, so it's throwing my whole week.
Yeah, well, so is this winter weather, man. Where is it, right? There's no winter right now. It's just insane. Western PA, Central PA, Eastern PA, it's all over. And we'll get, I believe we're going to have a little take from possibly Georgia, some of the Southern connections, see what weather's like down there today. But a lot of special stuff. So that book there, that's some pretty high-level book for Dom to be reading.
Yes.
Huh. I wonder why you're reading that book.
Well, I was at P&C. I'm not sure if you heard of that, but I was at P&C a couple weeks ago, and our Wednesday keynote, Mr. Coy Bowles, happened to be speaking, and
he was amazing.
He's the author. So some good reading, great book.
Yeah.
You know, prepping the imagination and thinking and creativity. So,
all right. Well, you know what? I think you got some good stuff there. There's a lot of stuff. P&C was amazing. Coy, phenomenal. We got a surprise for our guest, but I think it's time for something. What do you think?
I think so. I think it's time for the PAECT Pod.
Let's hit it. All right. Welcome to the PAECT Pod. We got the 21st episode going, and we got our special guest, Coy Bowles, with us today.
Yes.
So we're going to be breaking bread. We're going to have a great conversation. I mean, listen, we had a little pre-gaming, and I'm like fired up. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to bust through a wall. I'm like going to bust out the Kool-Aid man. Like, I'm going to roll with it. So just amazing as he was at Pete. I can't wait for him to be on the show. What do you think, Dom?
I'm fired up. I've been fired up since we knew that he was going to be on the show, and then talking with him before the show. I really wish we would have recorded it because it was some great conversation.
That is. So, all right, well, let's go ahead and kick off and get our guest to the show because it's going to be amazing. So here we go.
Yes.
All right. Hey there, Coy. How you doing?
Hey, what's up, guys?
Oh, it is amazing to chat with you and talk with you and that you're on the show.
Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, man, it's my pleasure, dude. No joke on like we were having a pregame conversation here, and it was great. So I hope it's as good as from here on out as it just was because we were getting into the sauce, man.
I think I buried the lead with like that. I was like, okay, now we're about ready to go live, and we're like, wait, we're not recording. I was like, oh, dude, I'm sorry. All right,
it's all good, man. We were just warming up, you know.
That's it. All right. Would you like to introduce our guest there, Dom?
Yes. I have a long introduction, but I'm going to shorten it because people are here to see you. I want to thank you for taking time. I met you even before you spoke. I tried actually sneaking in to help out with Ann. You were walking into the main ballroom with Ann. And I'm like, that's Coy Bowles. I went like running over like, hey, do you guys need any help? And you didn't. But then I saw you outside. You stopped, took a picture with me. I appreciate it. It wasn't even like picture time. And, you know, you could tell you were a genuinely great person. Then you spoke and it just blew the whole room away.
Awesome, man.
And, we were fired up to have you on here. Appreciate everything you do for education. Tonight we usually have a lot of shenanigans going on between Eric and I. We're cutting back on that, so we're giving you the floor. And I want to thank you for being on here because you are you're known for being a musician with the Zac Brown Band, not a one, not a two, but a 3-time Grammy winner. You're an advocate for education. You're a teacher. You're a student, musician, an author, and you're like a Renaissance man. Actually, with the different types of music you play and everything else that we were talking about earlier in the pregame show, and everything you do. So,
hey, and the other thing, Dom, it's a 3-member girl dad podcast.
Yes,
yeah, the Dad Club,
episode.
Dude.
That's it, man. There's a special place in heaven for girl dad. You know what I'm saying?
There is. Mine are 5 and 6 right now. So, man, I'm in the glory days. You know.
Oh yeah.
I hear there's a changing of the tides around the pubescent period. But I'm looking forward to all of it, man. You know?
Yeah. That used to be the big thing. My wife would be home all day doing the hardest job ever, raising the girls, and just doing all these things. And I would walk through the door, and she'd be, she's like, then I turn into mud. And all of a sudden, you're like king walking in the door, and I'm like, I didn't plan it. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I'm sure you have that too.
Yeah, mine's interesting to where we're on the road a pretty good bit, and so when my kids were younger, they were just really attached to mom, and I'd go on the road. This was before the pandemic, and they were young. My kids are 13 months apart from each other, so almost Irish twins. But so I'd go on the road, and they'd get really used to the 3 or 4 days with mom, and then I'd come back home, and I'd be home for 3 or 4 days because we're usually never gone for more than 3 or 4 days at a time because everybody has kids. And then we would have a week off or whatever else. But we were doing pretty well on the road and all this stuff. And so anyway, I'd come back home, and the first day my daughters would kind of be like, who is this dude? And why is he kind of telling me what to do? And, and then the pandemic hit, and they had seen me play music before. And I was at home, for 18 months straight, basically. And they had no clue at all that I was a musician in a band, And then when things kind of opened back up and I went out and played and they came out and saw me, they were like, who are all of these people that you're playing music with? And what's up with this is what you do? It was awesome, man. It was like, yeah, I'm in a band, and they're like, what? It was really interesting. It's like never in my life would I have thought that my kids wouldn't have known that I did what I did, except for something that, like a crazy event that happened, like the pandemic. So
yeah, that's what cool. But through all of that, it's the stories, right? And those stories will live on, and you'll always have that. It'll be a great one to tell.
Yeah, man, I'm very grateful for the time I got to spend with them at that young age at home and everything. It was just kind of a scary time, I think, for everyone. Nobody knew what was going on. And, and as a father, man, you're always, I kind of feel this role as the protector, to a certain degree. At least that's what I feel in my bones, And so, at the very beginning when people were washing their Amazon packages and leaving them on the steps and everything, and I was like, man, it's going to be hard to try to keep these kids away from danger, man. I need to just put them in some balloons and feed oxygen to them and throw some food in there and keep them, in a bubble for a couple years until this thing blows over. Either that or my country instincts kicked in, and I was like, head to the mountains, get off the grid, get some goats and some chickens, and just get out of here. You know what I mean? Head to a high water source.
That's funny. That's good stuff.
Yeah, man. Yeah. But it was it's been great, man. I'm a big fan of the experience of being a dad. It's awesome. A lot of fun.
Yeah. So now you came to Pete and C. You were talking to 1,000 educators. You had a Congo line form. You did some guitar. You shared some stories. I mean, some awesome stuff. So just what brought you to that point where we got to meet you at Pete and C? What all has evolved there as far as the connection with education?
Yeah, it's been a really interesting journey, man. I wrote my first children's book about 13 or 14 years ago. Had no kids. I wasn't married or anything. And I always wanted to be an author, and I thought it'd be a lot easier to write a 32-page book than like a 300-page book, just
some good math.
Figure.
Yeah.
I wrote this really cool story. It connected with teachers, and they started sending me pictures of them using it in the classroom. It had like an anti-bullying kind of message, which I was completely unaware of. I mean, I kind of thought that bullying has existed since the beginning of time, and I didn't know it had gotten kind of like to be a more, how do I say it? Not more of a problem, but more of something that it was more of a concern, it was more in the forefront of parents and teachers' minds, and, teaching kids how to act appropriate with each other. So it connected. And then from there, wrote another book that I wanted to be in the classroom, which was called Will Powers, Where There's a Will, There's a Way. And, it kind of progressively got to where I was writing for the idea of these books being in the classroom more and more. And slowly that's turned into me meeting as many teachers and educators and specialists over the years. And in like the last probably 3 or 4 years, I've really stepped into this arena of doing public speaking, which I think is something I feel really comfortable doing. I mean, I've been on stage since I can remember, I studied improvisation when I was in college. So I spent a lot of years studying jazz and this idea of just kind of going for it, So I don't get uncomfortable with silence, or I don't get uncomfortable with, being on stage and kind of just filling a room out kind of thing, But I have my stuff worked out to where it's, and I've done a lot of research on, kind of watching videos on speaking, talking to different people that I know who are speakers, and trying to take little notes from them and kind of finding my place within it. But it's really interesting, man. I feel like as though the public speaking specifically to educators is something that, one, I'm very passionate about it. I get to use my storytelling that I grew up with in the South. A lot of things are campfire, oral tradition kind of stuff. And I grew up in that atmosphere, and then studying music since I was a kid. The idea that being a public speaker that can play music, there's a whole nother kind of power of connection through music that I can use. And my dad's also a very funny guy. He's a people person. He's a jokey kind of guy. So I grew up in this way where, kind of trying to find the humor and connecting with people and laughing, as a kind of a break from things that sometimes. To be completely honest, man, it's been one of the coolest experiences as a human of tapping into all of these little things and some of the greater things that I've spent a lot of time on working out, and some things that come naturally to kind of get on stage and give back and share with other humans in this way that is kind of a full part of who I am. I'm not doing a great job of explaining it, but I get to use like all my tools, if that makes sense, and so as a person who's trying to connect, being able to like whip out some super glue and some tape and some, all these things that connect, I get to use all these things instead of it just being music, So I feel like there's a God-given natural cause and, reason why it's all happening. And to be completely honest, man, like when I got through with the Pete and C thing, I was just as stoked about the experience as anybody else in the room was. I was like, I was very grateful for the opportunity to get in front of people. And there's nothing, I feel like at some point in another life or something that I might have been a preacher or a coach or something like that. Cause I very much so have this, like, we can do it. We just gotta, kind of come together and getting everybody to really believe in themselves, and take that step forward. And it's not toxic positivity. I'm not trying to look at teachers and go, I know it's hard, but just like do it anyway. The whole idea is like, come on, man. Like, if this is your calling, which is the keynote I'm doing is called Connecting to Your Calling.
It's awesome.
I don't think I've ever met a teacher in my life who doesn't do it because it's, for security or something like that. Everybody I've ever met, they do it because
we all signed up to
get
rich. We all signed up to get rich. What are you talking about?
Yeah. You know what I mean? But there's a thing with that,
right.
To where, I feel if you've decided that your calling is helping kids and connecting with kids, and you're through the system or through trials and tribulations that have been, come in your life, if you're feeling not connected with that calling, if there's anything I could do to get somebody to go, remember this is what you're here for. And if it's what you're here for, then let's figure out how to get you back in the game. Like let's like really think about this, because the thing is that you have so much power and impact on our society and the families and the communities and specifically the kids, to where if it's your calling, we cannot afford to lose you. Like we can't afford for our education system to have less and less people who are doing it for their calling, and where there's like quicker turnaround to where people think it's their calling, they get in, they last for 2 years and then they're out. And then, all of a sudden every kid's only been with teachers who've been around for 2 years and quit. It's like, we need people who are, been teaching for 15, 20 years, 10 years, 8 years, and to me, the last couple of years have been really tough, man. I mean, it was tough on a lot of people, but I think the teachers really took the brunt. And I'll tell you this, here's the reason why teachers are my favorite people that I've met. On a whole, one of the number one thing for being a friend to me, if I let you in like the inner circle of my onion, is I have to know without a shadow of a doubt that if I need you, emotionally, like if my tires, flat and I call you, you're going to be the kind of person who's going to be like, I'll be there. And the older you get and the more you get involved with people, you realize that there's only so many people who are willing to be that kind of friend, and so the people that I have that are great friends are those kind of people. And I think that in large, teachers are the kind of people who, when humanity says we're about to go through this really crazy thing called a pandemic, and you got to show up, like you can't just call out and just be like, I'm not feeling this one, it's kind of like hell or high water. Teachers are like, I'm there, man. I'll be there, and it's for a higher calling. It's for the kids. It's for the families. And, but the thing about it is you can only do that for so long, taking phone calls from your friend. Like, hey man, I got another flat tire, to where, you get where you're kind of like, man, this has been a lot. So, it's a privilege for me to be able to stand in front of teachers who are, either fulfilled by their calling or questioning it, and try to give them some kind of analogies to the power that they have and how powerful they are to our communities and our kids and our society.
That's awesome.
That is. And I know like at Pete and C, there's a lot of ideas thrown around, and a lot of, it's a technology conference. We get into the theories behind it, the pedagogy and whatnot. But for a lot of people too, it's that message that you bring of, there's a lot of people like-minded, but a lot of times we do need that recharge. And it's events like this and some of the regional conferences, but the state conference where everyone from the state gets to get together and kind of feed off each other and get that momentum back up. And your message really helped out with that. Really, like, got the crowd going and got us moving with that, which is needed every once in a while. No matter how much you are into your career, you do need that refocus on occasion.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. I hope that I'm making a difference in a positive way. I have a pretty, hard time with imposter syndrome. I mean, it's kind of hard to be super passionate and have a lot of conviction and also be really humble. Like I battle sometimes with, this idea of like, why would I get on stage and try to tell somebody else what their life should be like, but then I go, well, I have really good intentions. Like, I don't think I'm all knowing. I don't think my opinion matters more than anybody else. But for some reason, I have a calling to stand on a stage and tell people from the bottom of my heart how awesome I think they are, which a lot of people are scared to do, so there's a part of it to where, it's about being vulnerable, man. The only way you grow is by being vulnerable. And to me, stepping on stage and feeling like I have this thing in my heart, my soul, that I want to give back to teachers, and I try to do it in a grateful way, because I mean, I don't know what it's like. I mean, I only know what it's like from having long conversations with people and asking them, you know, a lot of questions and everything. But I teach myself, but it's not on a day-to-day basis. You know, I teach at a university 4 times a semester, you know, and I enjoy doing it. And at one point in my life, I was a private teacher for music. You know, I had 40 students, and, you know, I sat down there with them privately, you know, for 30 minutes to an hour every single week. And I did that for 8 years. I mean, I was a private music instructor for a long time. That was my main gig, you know, before I started touring. But long story to, you know, kind of end this part of the conversation is that, you know, it's like the idea of being vulnerable, the idea of getting up there and kind of, you know, shedding my skin and sharing my heart, you know, and all of that. And, but obviously not trying to act like I know more than anyone else. All I know is that every once in a while you forget. And the analogy that I use, like, and you guys will remember it, was the power of music. You know, the power of music is just, it's really hard for any human to escape how powerful music is. I mean, it can literally make you transport time and space and remember people who aren't even alive anymore, you know?
Yeah.
And so I use that analogy of, I forget how powerful music is because I do it so much. I've been doing it for so long to where it takes somebody reminding me. Somebody will send me a Facebook message and say, hey man, we got married to your song last night. And you're like, whoa, like one of the best moments in your entire life. You chose, you know, the music that we create to be a part of that. That's amazing, you know?
Yeah.
And then I'm like, I step back and I realize like how powerful music is. But the same thing I think happens with teachers from, you know, from all the conversations I had. You do it day in, day out, and you kind of forget that, like, man, you're changing lives every second that you're in front of those kids, you know? So that's why, you know, I kind of, to put a bow on it, that's the whole concept behind the keynote speaking, and the mission that I'm on right now, which is connecting to your calling, you know?
Yeah.
Well, and you know what's awesome is PACT is founded on 4 pillars: connect, develop, lead, advocate. And that's exactly what you are just weaving right through that list. I mean, in everything you do, like when you're talking about the stories that you're sharing, the connections, you're developing those connections in that concept of talking with them and leading. Because honestly, like when you think, oh, there you go.
That's awesome.
We love Hillary. There
Free is a great song.
And she's an awesome person. You guys would gel very well. She's very cool. And but in everything you do with that leading, that advocating, and the other powerful thing is teachers are so self-critical. And the fact that you're up there just, you know, pumping them up as you did, just even in that, like no lie, that pregame talk when we were talking before the show, like just in the words that you're saying, and it's as humble and as honest and as true. It's just coming out. It's not a facade. Like you're being you. And it's awesome because there's so many teachers that need that, because we're just continually beating ourselves up with stuff like, you know, I was talking to a colleague the other day, and they're like, well, I don't really, you know, I said, wow, that activity's awesome. Can I get a copy of it? Oh, I never really shared it because I wouldn't even think it was that good. I'm like, are you kidding me? That's like better than what I was doing next door. Like, come on now, you know?
Yeah.
But that's our mentality sometimes, you know? So we need that voice.
That's one thing that's interesting, man, that you say that, as far as the music community. The music community is always been pretty full of like boosting people up, you know, like, because it's really easy as a musician to watch somebody else play who's really good and just be like, God, I wish I could do that, because everybody's so different from each other, you know. And so it's a big part of, like, you know, watching your friend play saxophone or something like that, and then afterwards when the show's over, you're like, dude, you kill it, oh my God, you sound so good, man. You know, so there's a lot of that kind of sharing, at least in the you know, the community that I've been a part of. And so, you know, it's interesting that teachers don't really do that, you know, as much. Like, one of the things that when you meet a musician, you're like, what's up, man? And they're like, yeah, dude, I grew up in Detroit. I ended up being influenced by a lot of like soul and funk music. And then I moved out to LA and I started playing with this artist and recording at this studio. And then I toured with this artist. So within like 5 minutes of meeting somebody, it's not like name dropping, but they give you kind of like their backstory, you know? Whereas it's so important when you meet somebody to be like, oh, okay, cool. Your heart and soul and where you come from is this Philly groove thing, you know, like this Philly soul thing. And so, you know that about them. Like when you meet me, you'll realize that like, you know, Southern music is a huge part of kind of, you know, who I am and what I do, you know? So in a perfect world, I would like somehow or another sprinkle dust on teachers and get them to share that story, their origin story with each other. So when a teacher met another teacher, like, yeah, man, you know, my mom was a teacher. She was really inspirational, but I had a high school teacher who really turned me on to the idea of, you know, how powerful teaching is. And then I struggled a lot through this part of my life, but then I ended up doing this, you know, and everybody would know each other's story, you know, kind of thing. And I'm a little bit on that mission too, of trying to get people more, because I'll do a keynote and I ask people, raise your hand if you've told people that work with you, you know, or anybody that's near you, your origin story. And out of like however many people, you know, 10-15% will raise their hand. I'm like, yeah, we got to change that. So during this conference or when we get finished, look at the person next to you and ask you, go, how'd you get started doing this? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's important. That's good stuff.
And that's a message, even like sharing with the kids to let them know, like, you know, not everything is cut and dry. People take different paths. People sometimes take tangled paths, if you will.
Yeah.
And it's not always a smooth sailing, but, you know, it's good to share that with the kids, and it builds the community. One question I do want to ask, because you've talked about, you know, being vulnerable, and we talked about how you kind of propped us up with your keynote. Days that you're kind of feeling down or you're kind of up against the wall, what do you do to get yourself going? And you talked about music, but what other things you do to get yourself kind of recharged on days you're just not feeling it?
Yeah, man, that's a good question. I mean, I have a bunch of different things, and same things don't work every day. You know, I'm really connected with my mother and father. So, you know, calling them and just kind of touching base, I think helps a lot. I've got a couple of friends that just getting on the phone with them and just like not even talking about what's going on in my life or why I'm like not really firing on all cylinders or anything like that, but just, you know, just joking around or whatever can make me feel better. And give me kind of like, you know, renewed inspiration or whatever. As far as like my own stuff, I have a couple mantras, you know, that I kind of will say, you know, enough times in my head until it kind of puts me back in a certain place. I recently, over like the last probably 5 years, got into using the sauna a lot. And so I've got this sauna that gets up to like, you know, almost 190, 200 degrees. And, I mean, it feels like, being inside an attic working on, AC units, in middle Georgia in August, you know? But I'll sit in that thing for about 15 minutes and it'll change some kind of chemistry or something that's going on within me, you know? And music is a good thing, but you know, I've struggled with, you know, with that place, my whole life. You know, I've always been someone who, is a pretty even dude, you know, like from the outside, but inside I'm a little bit, you know, probably have more days where I'm doubtful than most people around me would know, or, you know, or something like that. So, so it's been an interesting journey for me. And, the thing that has helped me the most, out of all of that stuff is I've gone to counseling since I was probably 18 years old, you know, on and off. And I strongly, suggest people, go. You know, I found that I think too much, and sometimes I can't get out of my own way, and I can't make myself stop thinking about things. And so, you know, just taking care of my mental health by going and talking to someone, who's not my mom, who's not my dad, who's not a friend, who, has always been something that's very good for me. And I've gone periods to where I go once a week for 2 years, and then I'll go again for a year. I always know kind of when it's time for me to kind of check back in and get into that. But, it happened. My mom and dad are hippies, and I was just really in a weird place in college. And I called my mom. I was just like, I'm just in a funk, man, and I was like, I don't feel like I can talk to you. I don't really feel like I can talk to, anybody. She was like, why don't you go talk to a counselor at school? She worked in financial aid. She was very aware of what your money that you were borrowing paid for, and so she was like, yeah, part of your financial aid pays for, you to be able to go see a counselor like so many times a semester. And so I went and met this dude, and he turned me on to like Eastern philosophy. So I started reading all these books, about, Zen philosophy and Buddhism, and, and just like kind of calming your mind and, and focusing on your breath and all this. And man, just really hit it off with the idea that like, it was so cool. I would go and hang out with him, and we'd listen to, 10, 15 minutes worth of music to chill out. And then we would talk a little bit. We'd like practice meditating, and and then I'd leave and I'd walk out and I'd be like, yeah, And I'd call my mom. I was like, this is the best thing ever. I feel amazing now. So, and also journaling.
Yeah,
I try to whenever anything gets pretty bogged down kind of feeling, I at last resort will go to just talking to myself, basically, so but man, I mean, I really think that a open conversation about mental health is something that is way overdue. I struggled a lot in school with my own identity, I was very creative and wanted to be real different in a small town. And I wanted to be way more different than I was kind of really allowed to be. So I had to find this sweet spot of being just different enough to not get made fun of, but different enough to where I didn't feel like I was a phony to myself. And, when I was in high school, and so I looking back now, I wish that I would have been in a community that would have been a little more open about talking about mental health and and counseling and things like that. Luckily my parents were really open-minded about it, but the community I grew up in was like, you just force it down and don't think about it anymore. It was kind of a Southern thing, and especially amongst men, Yeah.
Well, I think that was more than just a Southern thing. I mean, it's mental health has just come to the forefront. The stigma of, going to counseling has just kind of faded recently.
Yeah.
You look at with the professional athletes and people in general, that's always been something that was pushed into the background didn't matter.
Yeah. You don't want to show any weakness, specifically as an athlete or somebody that people look up to. The last thing you want to do is, someone to think that you don't have it together or something like that. I think it's a little easier for artists because, artists are, kind of supposed to be a little like thinking about, all these different things for songwriting and stuff like that. Whereas like an athlete's supposed to be bulletproof, so the fact that, someone like an athlete would have an open conversation about, being afraid of what fans think, or or feeling ashamed of like letting their team down, or having good days and bad days. It's like, what? You're supposed to just like dunk and slam and do this in front of somebody's face, and kind of move on. But I love the fact that the tides are changing and people are having these conversations. It's really important, man.
Oh, really? It really is. All right, so let's dovetail back. This is awesome conversation, but my question is, what were you like as a student? You talked a little bit about it, but I
was a really good student, man. I figured out how to play the system pretty well. I was smart in kind of different ways, I was really socially, emotionally smart. So and I got this from my parents. As a kid, my parents would have open conversations with me about what they were going through, as adults in areas where I needed to know. So if my mom and dad would have a conversation and I'd come in and I'd be like, what are you guys talking about? And they'd be like, we need you to go in the other room for a second. We're going to finish this conversation. They would always come back and my mom or dad or somebody would be like, your dad's going to go outside and cut grass for a little bit and, and think about what's going on. And he's going to come back in and we're fine, and we had this rule within the house that nobody went to bed mad, so we had to kind of at least get it worked out. So I grew up around two people who are very communicative about their emotions, which is another thing that's not very common in the South. I don't know if I'm only from the South, so I don't know if that's like common everywhere or whatever, but, it's particularly where I'm from in like kind of rural area. It's a lot of people are just like, let's don't talk about it and just keep moving on, so my parents didn't roll like that. So when it came to school, my dad and mom told me a couple key things, listen in class, read when they tell you to read, and do your homework, and you'll pretty much pass, you'll do just fine just by doing that. It wasn't hard for me to pay attention. I found that most of the time I was interested. I only had a couple of teachers who were like, they didn't enjoy teaching. And so I would be less likely to be stoked about their class because they weren't stoked about their class, But I did well in school. I mean, I had,
nice.
An A average and, through high school and stuff like that. And I was a little bit of a jokester, though. I will say I was the guy who was going to be trying to make the person next to me laugh. And I was a little bit of a button pusher. I was going to see how far I could get away with, joking around before somebody would call me out on it. But as soon as somebody was like, hey, bud, not in my class, I was like, okay, cool. There's the line,
Right.
So I kind of needed
separated.
I needed that like, kind of someone telling me, this is where the line of respect is,
Yeah.
But, also a lot of this social emotional stuff fed into, like me being in a bunch of different social groups. I mean, I hung out with like the football guys. I hung out with, the punk rock guys. I was really into skateboarding and stuff. I, got along really well with like cheerleaders and people that, normally skater kids wouldn't kind of think is cool. And even people that I had known my whole life that I went to like, like kindergarten and first and second grade. By the time we got in high school, if they weren't really popular, I would say hey to them if I sat down next to them. And so I ended up getting nominated and won my senior year, like the Mr. of the high school. I was like Mr. Upson Lee. I really think it all had to do with just the fact that I talked to everyone. Like as I got more popular throughout school and stuff, I was still like, if I saw Heather that I went to school with, and Heather might live in a trailer and, and might not have many friends, but when I sat down next to her in class, I was like, what's up? How are you? I was like, how's your sister doing? Cause I used to go swimming with them at the pool or whatever, so,
right.
So yeah, man, I think that,
Awesome.
and my dad was really, he's a really cool guy. So he gave me a couple of like key rules about being in school. Like, don't talk about the stuff that you do out of school, in school, in front of everybody, like keep that stuff out of school. You know what I mean? Like, and so, like all the teachers and parents and everything thought I was like this great kid. I mean, I was a good kid. I had great intentions, but if me and my buddies were being knuckleheads, and stuff like that, my dad was like, don't talk about that stuff in front of your teachers, because what's going to happen, they're going to hear you and then they're going to call me, and you don't want to talk with me about this stuff, And so I really listened to them, man. But my parents were so cool in that period of my life, to where they had really intense, strict parameters on what they expected out of me. When they told me to do something, I had to get up and do it then. You know, I was not allowed to be lazy. If my dad was like, go take out the trash, I had to do it right then. And was also, they gave me enough rope to hang myself. And they had one rule. You make bad grades, you get in trouble, we take everything away from you. You make good grades, you don't get in trouble, we'll go let you go to whatever you want to do. I mean, I went to see Nirvana when I was 15 years old. You know, I asked my mom and dad, could I go from 2 hours from where I lived in Middle Georgia all the way up to Atlanta with my buddy who was 16 years old to go to the Omni to see Nirvana play. He said, call your mom and ask him, can you go to see Nirvana? And I was like, dude, you're crazy. I'm 15, dude. You know what I mean? I am a baby. My mom and dad are not going to let me go see Nirvana. He was like, your parents are cool. Just ask them. And I was like, he was like, tell them that I'm driving. And I was like, oh, okay, I don't know what that's going to do. And I went home and I was like, Blake wants me to ask you guys if I can go to Nirvana with him. And my mom's like, let me talk to your dad. And I was like, oh, no,
I made it through. I made it past the first level.
Yeah, dude. And my mom and dad came back and they were like, okay, so who all's going? You know, and they were like, do any of these people do drugs and stuff? You know, and I was like, no, you know, and they were like, okay, well, how much are tickets? And I was like, $30. And they were like, do you have any money saved up? And I was like, yeah, I can buy a ticket, you know? And they were like, if you buy your own ticket and you go with Blake and you call us when you get there, you know, and then you know, you don't, and they were like, we're dead serious. If you monkey around with this opportunity, you are like, we're taking your skateboard, we're taking, you know, you won't drive when you turn 16. You know, it was like basically me like putting all my chips in and being like,
you were all
I'm willing to risk everything to go see Nirvana, you know? And, but they were cool, man. They let me go. I mean, I look at my kids and they're like, if they ask me like, hey, can I go see this crazy band, you know, up the street where even if I went with them, I'd still be freaked out probably, you know? So, yeah, long rant about how cool my parents are, but
no, that's
awesome.
cool. I was going to follow up with the, you know, being a girl dad. How would you treat that with your daughter at 15?
Yeah, man. My kids are 5 and 6 and they're older, 5 or 6, you know? And I feel like I'm going to try everything that I can to live that same, you know, here's the respect line, you know, I'll let you go as far and as wide as you want to go. You know, if you tell me the truth and you know, and we have this understanding that, you know, all this stuff is a privilege, you know, and if you respect and are grateful for the privilege, then you get to go far and wide. If you don't respect it, then, you know, I'm liable for you. So I have to take that away from you. You know, I think it's kind of a pretty simple concept, but I'm not there yet. Yeah. My kids are still like, there's not a lot of high risk stuff going on, you know, like I'm not really that concerned about who they're hanging out with other than this girl can be a little sassy. And I have a conversation with them like, hey, we don't want to be sassy like your friend, you know, but
See, I'm fortunate. My daughter has a really good group of friends, but driving a couple hours, you know, we're a couple hours outside of Cleveland, I would be hesitant. I'll go with you. I think. I don't know if I would be able to like just let them go to Cleveland and come back.
Yeah.
Without, you know, at that age.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely look back at it and I'm like, man, that was a really trusting experience. But I will say this, when I was 15, almost everybody I hung out with was like 17, 18, you know, for some reason, you know, so, you know, and my parents had these rules. I don't know what it was, dude. My wife is the same way, but I never skipped a day of high school, dude. I am not a rule breaker. Like I wasn't really interested in getting in trouble. I wasn't interested in pushing the rules. Like I'd goof off in class to kind of find out like how much, you know, joking around I could get away with, but I wasn't interested in like really getting in trouble or that kind of stuff. So as soon as stuff started going down that I know, like you can get in trouble for this, I was out, you know, I was like, I don't want to do this, you know? And so it was interesting because when, you know, my mom and dad had this rule where I couldn't get in the car with people who were, you know, who could drive when I was 15. So I was a skater. My parents would drop me off in town to go skating. and my other friends would get in my buddy's car and drive across town to go to another spot. And because my parents told me that I couldn't get in the car with them, I would have to skate all the way over to the other spot, which would take me like 30 minutes to get there. By the time I'd get there, they'd been skating there for 30 minutes and they're like, we're going to go over here. And I'd be like, all right, I'll meet y'all over there in 30 minutes, you know? So, which is really funny to think about, but I never once like, broke the rule for some reason. I don't know if I thought my parents were always watching me or really what it was. I just was like, this is the rule. I follow it, I guess, you know, and I'm kind of somewhat still like that, I guess, you know.
Well, you had a lot riding on it because they gave you that trust.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I definitely was not interested in, like, you know, they let me dress however I wanted to. So I got to wear like, I got to have long hair. I got to, you know, wear weird clothes and stuff. And they were like, basically, if you get in trouble or don't make good grades, we'll cut your hair and make you dress like everybody else. And I was like, dude, I do not want that, you know, take away somebody's cool. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Whew, they knew your buttons. They knew your buttons.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Well, the strange connection is the Kurt Cobain. In high school, I would work in Bethlehem Stabler Arena, and they were short on what they called the Barracuda crew. And it was like the frontline guys, between the Kurt Cobain and the drunk people in the audience. And for whatever reason, I definitely wasn't tall, but had a little bit more brawn on me back then. So I got stuck in the Barracuda crew. So I got a black eye. Some guy was trying to get to Kurt Cobain, and my face went between his fist and getting to stage. So that's my fancy Kurt Cobain story. I got
wow,
there, so.
Dude, that's a good story though.
But yeah, pretty wild.
Took a black eye for Kurt, dude.
Yeah, that's it. So he didn't sign it or anything. So, you know.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah. The other one, when you're talking, like, you know, like your parents are saying, hey, don't say this to your teacher. They're going to call me. Today, it's, man, like, I think about all the stuff we did when we were kids. It would be on YouTube.
Oh, yeah, man.
A whole other world with social media, you know what I mean?
Yeah, the paradigm has definitely changed. You know what I mean? And I think that that's another thing as far as, you know, this like open talk about mental health. You know, it's like, you know, the idea of being isolated by your peers, you know, via social media and stuff like that. That was something that you could do, like not inviting somebody to a party or something like that, or an event or something back in the day, but like excluding somebody from a chat or kind of roasting them off to the side, or, you know, and then finding about it later. You know, there's a deep, like, inner workings of communication now between, you know, kids and all these different platforms to do it on. And, you know, it goes back to what you were saying before, man, as far as your kids hang out with a good group of kids. I mean, I think that's the utmost important thing.
Huge.
Is to just be aware of who your kids are hanging out with, and, you know, and talk to them and be real with them. And as a teacher too, man, you know, it's like, some of the best teachers that I ever had were the kind of people who would pull people out in the hall and be like, hey man, I heard you got in trouble, dude, for some other stuff. Yeah. You can't be doing that, dude. You know, like, you're a good kid, you know, you got stuff to do, man. You got, you know, like, and kind of give them this, like, you know, not dad talk, but almost like a neighbor would, you know what I mean? Like somebody or uncle or something like that. Somebody who just cares, you know? And I think as our education system has moved along, it makes caring a little harder to do personally. And you have to be a little bit more delicate, because you don't want a student going home to his mom or dad and being like, you know, Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so pulled me out in the hall and was, you know, questioning me about getting in trouble. And then they come down and they're like, why are you questioning my kid about, that's not your role or your job, you know? But at the same time, I really think that a lot of that kind of stuff goes a long way. This community, this interaction, this caring, you know? So, that's another thing that, you know, I'm kind of, an advocate for is, you know, giving teachers the ability to be teachers, you know, like what their full role is, instead of cutting their wings and just being like, just teach them, you know, because in a huge way, teachers know the kids better than anybody else in their lives do in real life, because they're around them more hours during the day than their actual parents are, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that teachers should take over the role of being parents or anything like that, but allowing a teacher who cares to care about your kid, I think is a good thing, you know?
Yeah. And a lot of times we see a side the parents don't see because the students have their guard up around their parents for the, you know, like, as you were saying, they're afraid of losing privileges or getting in trouble. And in school, their parents aren't there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I was gonna say my line in the classroom. I say, all right, guys, I'm gonna dad so hard right now. I said, I have an 18, 15, or 18, 17, and 14-year-old. I said, my daughters would be shaking their head and leaving the room right now. I said, but the difference is I'm your teacher. The door is shut. You're not allowed to leave. I said, so we need to have a conversation. And I'll just dive right into it, you know, like, because you got to sometimes. You just got to get to the heart. Like Dom said, there's so many times where we could get through to a kid where a parent can't. And on the other side, I've had that, like, trying to help my daughters. I teach math. I teach 6th grade math. My daughter's in 6th grade math. I'm trying to help her with 6th grade math. And I got told, well, you teach your school 6th grade math. My teachers do it different. They know it better than you. You know, like I couldn't even teach my daughter 6th grade math. So I had to go. I had to tell the teacher, like, I'm like emailing them, like, hey, I was trying to help them with this. I'm pretty sure this is how you do it. They're telling me I'm wrong. I said, have fun with it. I said, but you know, here's what you got to do. And like, oh my gosh. But so there's so many times where I tell parents, like, I get it. I've been on that other side, but like, and you just try to do what you can. But it's a delicate balance, you know.
Yeah, it's really interesting when it comes to that. We have a friend of ours who's like ex professional Major League Baseball player. He was a pitcher, and his son's like a really good pitcher. And his dad is like, his son won't even listen to his dad, and his dad's won a World Series, you know. So he has to call his friends and be like, hey, can you tell my son that he needs to throw like this because he won't listen to me? And they'll literally call him and tell him the exact same thing that his dad just said, but he'll be like, oh, for real, you know, like, I'm gonna start doing that, you know. So I mean, I guess that there's a part of at some point, you know.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah,
it's pretty funny, you know.
Well, and there's a lot of, and I apologize, Dom, I'm jumping in here.
That's
I apologize. Okay. The social emotional side is so huge, and just for the record, Coy didn't say, hey, I'm only going to go on if you talk about selling blah 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 or doing this or that. But I wanted to pull up your website because you've done a lot of books and it kind of dovetails. So like, I'm just gonna pull this up here, and we've talked about that social emotional side. Were there any books that you feel like kind of like you were diving into that as far as themes go, or just some stories behind the books, maybe a little bit?
Yeah, I think because I come from such a place to where social emotional learning is such if I do have kind of a social superpower or anything, it's the ability to like understand people and read a room and know how to, you know, kind of function within a social setting, within a team or something, with the best intentions and manage my own emotions throughout all of that, you know? So almost all of these books at the core of the main character or the story is some kind of, you know, loop back to this idea of, you know, your unique qualities of who you are make you, you know, are your strengths, you know, and you have to play into those, and you have to kind of be aware of who you are and what your strengths and weaknesses are, and also be aware of, you know, how your emotions affect your interaction with people. So almost all of these stories, you know, kind of have some, you know, kind of almost effortless tie back into a social emotional kind of education. But the Little Red Door series is one that really kind of the backbone of that whole, you know, kind of idea and concept of this little red door kind of being a portal to go anywhere and everywhere is the idea of being creative and aware of, you know, who you are and how you feel while you're being creative, you know. That's kind of the overall arching concept, which I'm really proud of that book series and how it's done within you know, a market or something like that. I mean, I self-publish. I don't have a publishing company. You know, I literally ship these books out from my house. You know, so when somebody goes on this website and buys it, there's a good chance that I'm going to pull it off a shelf, sign it, and I have one person who helps me like mail them out, and to date, I've sold, hundreds of thousands of books, from just doing it my own way and just hustling, man. I mean, that's really who I am at heart, is somebody who's not scared to work hard. I mean, I think that's one thing that always helps with my imposter syndrome, kind of, we were talking about that earlier, is that I'm not scared to get dirty and like after the Pete and C thing, I wanted to hang out and meet everybody, and it wasn't about buying my books. If you didn't buy a book, I still wanted to hang out, and that's just kind of who I am. I mean, I'm willing to put the work in to develop the relationships and let people know like a real side of me, and all of that. So I hope that I can continue to do stuff like that. I mean, I purposefully self-publish books and whatnot because I like being agile. I like being able to being able to just kind of do whatever I want to and sell books to who I want to at a price that I feel is reasonable in the moment and whatnot. And make moves like that. I was with a bigger publishing company at one point, and it was a great honor, but it was just not as it didn't have the tenacity that I really was like looking for. So I, have continued to kind of do it on my own, But I'm also the same dude who's like, we had a guy come over and spray our backyard for mosquitoes, and I asked my wife, I was like, "How much did that cost?" And she was like, "It's like $50 every time he comes over." I was like, $50 to just walk around the backyard for a minute and a half? It's like the next day I had a $450 blower, went and bought some chemicals from this guy I needed to damn near get a license for, and all this stuff. And I'm like doing it on my own. My wife's like, you haven't sprayed the yard in like 2 months, and then I'm like, okay, cool. And I'm like, I'm out there with this mask and all this stuff on, so I'm definitely the dude who's like, I'll just do it myself,
Right. Yeah.
I want to go back to circle back before we were on the air, old school, before on the internet, you're in the old school here because a child of the 70s and 80s. You were telling us about your one history teacher, and being a history teacher myself, I love that story. If you could tell the people that weren't here in the pregame about your high school history teacher.
Yeah, I had two teachers who really affected my life. First, I want to mention someone has posted in the comments about kids feeling seen. Kids need to feel seen. I couldn't agree with that comment more. I really feel like that's one of the biggest strengths that a teacher has, is being able to, level out with a kid and really, kind of put things in a place to where they're like, I see you, man. I hear you. I see you, for the good and the bad, for everything. But like, we're all a work in progress, So, so speaking of these two teachers, one of them was someone that I didn't have really that much of a social connection with, or an emotional connection with. I wasn't friends with him or anything like that, but it was my high school history teacher, and he was kind of legendary within the school. Like when you turned to senior and you got, your teacher assignment of like who was, what classes you had and all of that, a big thing was like, do you have Coach Gill? And he was a really fit dude. He was a coach. And sadly, a lot of times in high school, when you hear coach, you think guy who's mostly into sports, who teaches so he can mostly be into sports, kind of thing, which is not the case. But this guy was incredibly intelligent and super ripped. I mean, and he wore shirts that were not like trying to show off his muscles, but he was big enough to like, no matter what shirt that he wore, you were like, damn, this dude's jacked, And so I remember going in the first day of class, and he was up at his podium, and he had like this really straight posture and this, just like like really tiny waist, and his body went like this, and and everything. He's real, about 6'1" kind of guy, and like he had these veins, muscles that kind of came down on his neck. He's just like 0% body fat kind of dude. Yeah. And he goes, a lot of people, like to ask me what my disciplinary procedures are. And he picks up his desk like about 4 inches and just goes, poof, like, total control of like handling this thing. And he goes, there are none like that. Like there are no disciplinary procedures because you will not act up in my class, and I just remember being like, everybody in the class was like, ooh, like we've heard about this dude. It's like, it's happening. We're officially in the movie, and then he told us to read that night. Like I was, telling you guys earlier. And I read, I went home and read, and I came back and he asked me a question about, I was the first person he called on in the class, at least how I remember it. And he said, that's not a legitimate answer, basically. Like I was kind of fumbling through, and the question he asked, I didn't answer it with any kind of intelligent response. And he goes, you can continue standing, and by the end of the class, like, man, 90% of the class was still standing, because nobody had read like they should. And within 4 days of doing that, everybody in the class was reading, because he just demanded this, this kind of this execution of education and intelligence from his classroom, which I was mentioning before is a lot of work, man. That's when you ask a lot out of people, a lot's asked out of you, But the other thing that was really amazing is that he didn't waste a single part of the classroom time-wise. Like when you came in, you sat down, the first couple minutes of class were going over current events, and then he would go back in history and talk about like what happened on this day, 100 years ago, 25 years ago, whatever. It would sometimes change. And then we'd go through a lesson, and then he would take everybody and go to the back of the class to a record player, and he would do what's called a vignette. And he always thought it was really funny to say the word vignette for some reason. He was like, this is a vignette, and we would go back and listen to a record. And sometimes it would be music. Sometimes it would be a speech. Sometimes it would be a comedy, bit or whatever. And it was all appropriate for the room. But it was like, it wasn't just like sitting in your desk doing the same thing you did yesterday and listening to somebody talk forever, and all this stuff. And I still get a lot of inspiration out of that when it comes to doing keynotes, because you learn through the power of teaching. It's all about keeping people's attention. And if you're just blabbing on, for an hour straight, if it's your favorite person on earth, somebody that like, name one person you want to meet and you're like, this person, if you get to sit down with them and they start talking for 15 minutes straight, at like 17 minutes, you're going to kind of be like, okay, my favorite person, but I'm kind of losing you here. It's hard to keep focused. So it's really cool to use the entire room to like, we're going to move over here now. And then you're going to focus in a different way with a different setup instead of, that to me, that's really good for the human kind of attention span. So I try to do that same thing when I do speeches. I try not to talk for longer than 10 minutes without playing a song or telling a joke or telling a story, and keep it moving between music, speech, and storytelling to where it never gets too mundane, and hopefully I'm getting better at that as I go. But, so yeah, man, Coach Gill was this legendary guy. And I ended up going into college as a history major because of him. And then I quickly realized that, history is not fun or interesting at all if the teacher's not into it like him. Because my, college professor was like super strong accent, did not invest any energy at all into changing anything up. So it was like this,
Yeah.
Oh my God. But I still look back at, I'm still inspired by him to this day, man. Like he's one of the most inspirational people I've had in my life because he really cared and he used his intelligence, his creativity, and all of his basically, strengths to be the best version of whatever he could be. So if he was like not a teacher, if he was an artist, his album would be one of my favorite albums of all time, because he would be using all of, all of the rhythm and all of the notes and all of this stuff in a way that's, so it didn't really matter that he was a teacher that he influenced me. It was just the way, the kind of the person that he was. And then I had another teacher named Tom Sullivan that I talk about very often. But he and I were really good friends. I did a lot of musicals and plays and things with him. So I knew him inside of school and outside of school. And he really cared. He was somebody that I could ask, a lot of questions to, and he would be straight up with me. And he pulled me out in the hall my senior year and said, "What are you going to do? What are you going to go to college for?" And, I was basically like, "I don't know, dude. I'm going to go to college. That's all that matters right now, And he said, "Okay, I want to ask you next week." And he pulled me out into the hall the next week and said, "I asked you last week, what are you going to go to college for?" And I was like, "Dude, I don't know." And I knew him well enough. I was like, "What gives, man? You're not pulling anybody else in the hall for this stuff, And he like looked at me and was like, "Man, you have a lot to offer. You need to take this next part of your life seriously." And, I'm telling you right now, man, you need to really, focus on this. You gotta, you could be a big deal kind of, like if you want to be. And I went and sat in my car, man. And I can remember like it was like yesterday and like a part of my brain lit up, to where I just sat and thought in my little Toyota Corolla, paint job that, looked like a cat had scratched all over it and everything else, 2-seater, this car probably costs like $700 soaking wet, and I remember sitting there and looking at myself. I actually grabbed the mirror and like tilted it down and was like looking at myself. And I just remember being like, why did he do that? It was awkward. It was weird for him. It was weird for me. Like, why did he do that? And then I kept kind of thinking about it. And I was like, it all kept coming back to like, it's because he cares, man. And it was just so mind boggling to me that he would care, like, why does he care about me? Why is he doing this to me? And at some point it hit and there was a part of my brain that lit up and it was like, cause he really thinks that I can do it, and if he really thinks that I can do it, why would I not think that I can do it too? And I just remember being like, screw it, man, I'm going to do it, and that was the moment to where I kind of looked at myself and was like, me and all my friends, man, we sit around all day long and we talk about these movies that we're going to write and, and record and film and all of these albums we're going to do and all this cool stuff that we're going to do and whatnot. And I was like, I'm going to do it, man. And I'm going to do it. I don't care if I sleep in a ditch. I don't care how far and long and wide it takes me to do it. I don't really need any security. I have my mom and my dad. I never had money in the first place. I just don't need a lot, man. All I need to do is just hustle and believe in myself and head down, helmet on, and keep going at it. And, I went out and I started studying biology and was wanting to make a big difference in the environmental, science and things of that nature. And I had a teacher come up to me and this might be the most important teacher of my entire life. He looked at me and said, man, I can tell that it really bothers you that when we talk about the idea that you could work hard and not make it the kind of difference that you want to make, because a lot of times in environmental science, you kind of quickly realize that they just get fined and they get to keep kind of doing the same thing, but now they're under like, suspension and they're under probation and they're getting fined, and it really turns into a money thing. And he was like, man, I'm telling you right now, if you're the kind of dude who has the win, this is not for you. And 2 weeks later, I called my mom and dad. I was like, I want to quit college, and they were like, okay. They were like, what for? And I was like, I can't do it anymore. I was like 6 months away from graduating too. And they were like, what do you want to do then? Because my mom was like, you got to graduate. There's no way, you're not graduating. And I was like, I want to do music. And they were like, okay, well, what does that look like? And I was like, I don't really know yet, And so my mom said, okay, well, if you want to go to school for music, then you got to find out where you're going to go to school. You got to audition. You got to do all this stuff. And also, I want to find out how a musician makes a living, because I've never met a musician before who made a living off of playing music. And if that's what you're wanting to do, then you got to show me that it can be done. Dude, you're talking about the most embarrassing thing ever, to be, 19 years old and, talking to my professor, soon to be professor, now new guitar instructor, and me being like, hey man, can you suggest me musicians who make a living off of musicians that I can call and ask them how they make a living, because my mom wants me to talk to them. And so he gave me like 3 dudes' numbers, and I called him and I was like, hey man, I know you don't know me. I got your number from Dave, but my mom is making me call musicians and find out how to make a living off of playing music. And Dave said, you might be able to help me out. And they were like, dude, all right. And they would tell me, they were like, I do all this different stuff. And they were like, but you got a really good mom, man. And I just remember being like, at the end of I was like, I do have a really good mom. This is so embarrassing. Like, this is so uncool. This unreal. But at the end of the day, the intentions are for me, and she has my best interest. So, That's awesome. It's like, you win some, you lose some. But I switched over to music and had a bunch of really awesome professors. And I went from being a C+ student, studying as hard as I could in biology, to like an A++ student in music. And the rest is history, man. Got out of school from studying jazz and got in my own band, and then started opening up for the Zac Brown band, and then got in, where I was playing in the Zac Brown band, and quickly realized that these dudes were ready for war. They wanted it bad, man. I mean, everybody in that band, they wanted to tour. They wanted to be a big deal, and they were the only people that I was hanging out with who really wanted to be like, not famous, not rich, not any of that stuff, but they wanted to be renowned, they wanted to be recognized, kind of thing, amongst other musicians as like the real thing. And, coming from a jazz world, a lot of jazz musicians that I was hanging out with at the time weren't really into like social media or promoting, or any of that stuff. So when I found these guys who were doing kind of like singer-songwriter, Americana, somewhat kind of country, music, it was really interesting, because every single person in the band had a job. They split all the jobs up. So Zac was like going out and making connections. Jimmy, the violin player, was the one who did the contracts and closed out at the end of the night. Hop, the bass player, was the one who was in charge of like all the sound gear and equipment and making sure everything in the trailer was loaded up, and so everybody had these roles. And I came in and was like, oh, if you guys roll like this, like I'll get down, like hand me a job, I'll do it. And so I became kind of in charge of, social media was new back then, but MySpace and, interacting with people on that, and
Tom.
Yeah.
You're friends with Tom.
Yeah, I'm friends with Tom.
Yeah.
But I loved it, man. I mean, as soon as
awesome.
I met those dudes and they wanted it that bad, I was like, man, it doesn't matter if nothing ever happens. Just the idea that everybody wants it this bad and is willing to do everything for it. You're like, that's all you can do. At the end of the day, the rest of it's just luck and fate and faith and, all this other stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, who knows, but luckily, things took off and songs started happening and people started connecting to it. And man, it's just been the craziest ride ever, dude. I mean, especially from a small town kid from middle Georgia, where this was not supposed to happen to me, but man, I'm glad that it did. And I take the responsibility of what comes along with it, and having a voice and giving back as I take as much honor and all of that, and as I do anything else in my life,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, dovetailing with how you're talking about the different things we talk about with the books, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about, the songwriting, because you're writing the children's books and the songwriting. So how would you describe that process? Like, we talk a lot to our students about collaborative work. You have to work with other people. You have so many life stories that we've just learned in this hour that we've been together. This is just unbelievable. So how would you describe that process of how that comes into your writing? Maybe a song that you feel like, you really poured into that you're pretty proud of. What are your thoughts with that?
Yeah, man. They're all different every single time. I personally am more of a melody guy than I am a lyric guy. Okay. I listen to the melody more than I listen to the words, I kind of think that, some people will argue me to the grave on this one, but I kind of think if you have a great melody and bad lyrics, then you have a decent song. But if you have a bad melody and great lyrics, then you have like a good poem that's a bad song, So the melody is really important to me. And I, kind of have studied melody for long enough and have somewhat of a knack for writing memorable melodies or catchy melodies or stuff like that, whether it's a guitar part or, a lead vocal melody or something like that, or some background thing. That's something that I've had that and arranging are probably my two strongest strengths. And,
Awesome.
As far as what I bring to the band is having ideas of like, okay, I have this riff, we could use that as the intro. And then, we'll use your guys' verse melody and chorus, but what if like right before we go to the chorus, we were to do this thing here, so it wouldn't be the same as every other song. And, I'm usually, kind of someone who has a decent amount of ideas when it comes to that kind of stuff, like harmony stuff, which the band's really known for.
Yeah.
I'm out, I'm like, that's y'all's lane. Don't get me involved. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I'm just going to mess it up, which like John Hopkins, the other guy, one of the other guys in the band, that's his forte. Nice. That's where he steps in and he really just super is like, we're going to do this. And, he's like, it can have a old school Eagles sound. It can have a Beach Boys sound. It can have, he hears it all in his head, man. It's just fascinating to me,
awesome.
But as far as the songwriting thing goes, generally it kind of starts with like a feeling or something that sparks some kind of creative, intention or spark in you, and you write it down, whether it's in your phone or in a notepad, a line, a thought, just a cool word, and then, or you'll end up writing a journal and about how you're feeling. And then at some point you'll kind of like circle, like, this is how I really feel right here. I finally got down to putting it in one line or something like that. And then you just constantly do that all the time until it slowly turns into birthing babies, like you keep doing it until like there's an arm, there's a leg, there's a couple ribs, and it just keeps happening until, you eventually one day, there's somewhat of a complete idea. And then when you get involved with collaborating, which is such a huge part of this band, it really becomes, something that's magical. because there's a kind of like one rule is like you can't be negative. So you can't shame on somebody's idea. Like if somebody comes up with an idea, and even though literally in your brain, if you could just say whatever you wanted to say, you'd be like, that's stupid. Like you have to have this filter on to where you don't say that. And if anything, you say something around the idea of like, okay, why don't we pause on that idea for a second, and then we can always come back to it, and we've got it on recording, and then let's try some other things. And so, whoever's idea it was feels validated, that it was understood, it got its place in time, and we'll come back to it. And and some ideas that kind of got shelved sometimes end up coming back around, and they get their due time, and sometimes they don't. But that kind of attitude has been some kind of unspoken rule within the band, to where nobody wants, I guess everybody is social emotionally like well-rounded enough to where they know that they don't want anybody doing that stuff to them, so they don't do it to anybody else, just kind of golden rule kind of stuff, so but man, I mean, being part of writing some of the songs that I've been a part of writing, like I was a writer on Colder Weather, which is this just gigantic song, man. I mean, still to this day, when the piano part hits and everything, people will just go, and it's like this moment, and every single time that we play the song, I'm just like, I can't believe that this song exists and I was ever even a part of it. I can't believe I get to play it, much less one moment in time I was, creatively a part of being involved in being a writer on it, awesome. So it happens in all these different ways, and now I'm spending time writing kids music, and which is really interesting because I listen to a lot of, pretty I don't walk around listening to kids music all day long, and I definitely don't walk around listening to happy music all day long. I mean, a lot of the stuff that I'm into is like blues and, stuff that's like, I guess darker or something like that. But there you go. Music for tiny humans.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the thing about it's been really interesting is I really, really enjoy writing the children's music, man. It's kind of like a little bit of a creative break, to where it's like for a second, you don't have to worry about if it's so poetic, or if you're diving into the adult human experience in a way that's like, kind of drenching a towel out. It's more like, just write something that you feels good, and continuously work on the melody until it can get to where it's in a good spot, and my buddy and I, Carlos, who I write the music with, have really found a sweet spot in our songwriting and whatnot. But ultimately, man, it's this weird kinetic, creative energy that only certain people can tap into. And I've written songs with a lot of other people. I've gotten in the room with people who are every bit as good as the guys in the Zac Brown band are. It's this willingness to share ideas and be vulnerable, and understanding this kind of code that I'm gonna just constantly put myself out there. I'm gonna constantly put myself out there, and we're all gonna respect each other until something kind of manifests out of this. It's that energy that is something that is like unlike anything I've ever seen in my life. I mean, we can all get in the room and have not seen each other for 4 months, get in the room and start tossing ideas around, and 10 minutes later, you'll just be like, whoa, it's happening again. It's just bananas, man. I mean, the only thing I can really relate it to, and I would never, ever in my life compares to the Beatles, but if you've seen the documentary Get Back, to where it's like a fly on the wall, a lot of that same mojo that you see them just kind of tinkering around with something, then they start throwing like, what if you do this? And what if I do this? And then next thing you know, it's like Hey Jude comes out of it, you know, and you're just like, what? You know, it's a lot like that.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
I wouldn't compare us to the Beatles by any means, but at the same time, whatever you see them doing, whenever I watched that thing, I was like, God, man, wouldn't it be like, how cool would it be to be a Beatle? Because I know what that feeling is like, you know?
Yeah, it's a true connection you guys have when you can do that, where you're away for a while, then you get back together and everything just kind of vibes.
Yeah, and everybody is really good at being leaders. Everybody has their strengths and they play to them, and everybody all have a lot of respect for each other. You know, as far as all that goes, and at the end of the day, I think it works good that it's a democracy with like a president, you know, because if we were all like, you know, equal in the band, then we could get in arguments and our egos would get in the way. And a lot of times the fact that Zach will make the call, you know, we'll all think about this thing and we'll all say, you know, I think the bridge should be this. I think the bridge should be that. I think the bridge should be this. Everybody's got their different opinions. And then he's like, okay, we're doing the bridge like this. And everybody's like, all right, cool. Let's move on. You know, and so you don't get into a lot of like animosity or spinning your wheels creatively because, you know, you're like, dude, it's great. You made the call. Like, and then we get to move on and nobody's got to like, you know, sit and go, you know, well, I'm Keith Richards and I'm, you know, 1/4 of this band or whatever,
Right.
you know what I mean? It's kind of like, which the Stones are awesome. So I don't even know if they argue about stuff like that, but you know what I mean? It's like, it really, it helps the dynamic, to be able to just move forward, you know?
And I think it's awesome because, you know, there's a process involved and it takes time to make the art. And that goes across any kind of job. Like things aren't always, you know, straight line, aren't always smooth sailing. There's a process. There's a lot of work involved. And like you were saying, the buy-in from the band, you guys, everyone has a job to do. Everyone had a job to do. So even though you're artists, you're breaking it down and you're doing the legwork behind it. So it's not, you know, well, this is what I want to do. So I take classes or I pick up an instrument and it's going to happen. There's a lot that goes into it. And a lot of people don't realize that. And you know, coming from
a lot of people aren't willing to, I don't know of any other band that I was in to where we would have conversations with a lot of groups that we were in, to like, okay, you're going to start doing this, you're going to start doing this. And then after 3 weeks, that person's kind of like not really doing it anymore, you know? And it wasn't like there was somebody going around going, make sure that you do this. It was like, there was just this kind of weird level of everybody wanted it so bad, you know, and they knew that everybody had been band leaders in this band for years. So they knew how much of a pain in the ass it was to try to run a band, you know what I mean? And how hard it was to make a living off of doing it and all of this stuff, man. They were just, so everybody was kind of like lions in a lion's den, you know, who knew how to run their pride kind of thing, you know? And so they, so when we all got together, we all kind of kept each other accountable, which is like legendary for rock musicians and stuff to be like late. Right. But we used to have this thing, even like in the old days, to where we were like, you know, getting on this bus that we had. It was like a little like mass transit bus, you know, held like, 8-9 people kind of thing, you know. Man, this thing was, dude, it was so dangerous. The fact that we used to travel around this thing with a trailer full of gear that was heavier than it is just bananas. But it looked like the Sanford and Son kind of version that had like an AC unit welded on the side of it and all this stuff, you know. I don't think it was up to code at all, but it was how we got to everywhere. But man, we used to text each other cha-ching, because we had a thing to where if you were late, for every minute you were late, you owed the band $5. And there was this thing, dude, to where like if you were gonna be a couple minutes late and you knew it, I mean, you'd be driving like a bat out, man, just like just because you didn't want to be like see cha-ching on your phone, you know? And I have so much anxiety about being late to places to where I'd be there before the bus was, you know, I'd be showing up, you know, I'd be cha-chinging the bus driver. Like, I'm already here, dude. You know, where you at? You know, but I mean, it's that weird small stuff to where we were ribbing each other about like, hey, dude, you're 5 minutes late. We don't roll like that, you know, like we're, you know, and it was like slightly a joke, but it was also slightly like, we don't roll like that, dude. You know, like get your stuff together. Nobody's late. You know, we all have to be accountable, which I mean, for me personally, I function really well in an atmosphere like that. You know, like I like being accountable. I like holding my own. And I also like knowing that everybody else is going to be kind of held to the same responsibilities. And, you know, kind of like the rules with my parents, you know, like once the boundaries are set and everything, it's just like, okay, we can get down to what it is that we really want to do, which is travel and have fun and, you know, make music and do a bunch of cool stuff, you know?
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, dude. Oh, it's bananas,
so cool.
Man. I mean, I'm telling you right now, like the humor, I'm an only child too. So I didn't grow up having brothers. It took me a while to adapt to being on a bus with, you know,
I can imagine,
10 other guys or whatever else. You know, you quickly realize who you think you are is not who you really are. Who they think you are is who you really are.
Right.
You know, because you can't hide, you know, when you're on a bus, you know, but the cool thing about it though, man, ultimately is I have brothers now. I'm a part of this, you know, this big family. We all take care of each other. We're really tight. And above everything, we laugh more. Like the sense of humor and the jokes that we have are so unbelievably funny. And we spend so much time laughing to where that's like the hidden secret of the band is like, these are the funniest dudes I've ever met in my whole life, you know?
That's awesome.
So, I mean, what more could you ask for, dude? You know, like, so I've, you know, it's another reason why I'm so into, you know, doing podcasts like this and being part of the positive when it comes to education and teachers and, you know, and all of that. Cause, man, I just get to live such a cool life, you know, and if there's any way to make a difference in some way because of that cool life, then count me in, you know?
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Like I had a student a couple of weeks ago. I used to teach freshmen and seniors. Now I'm teaching sophomores and senior getting ready to graduate here in a couple of months. He's like, any advice, Mr. Sal? And it's kind of, he said it flippantly. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, oh, for school, you know, what should I do with my life? I'm like, do something you love. And you can tell by the way you're talking, you love what you do because you're going to be doing whatever your career is going to be for the next 50 years or more. If you're lucky enough to live that long, you got to love it. Otherwise, you're just going to be grinding through life and not enjoying it. And you tell by the way you're talking, you love what you do. And that's important.
Yeah. I hit this place too, man, to where, I had a creative confidence, you know, shift happen. And I don't really know what caused the shift. I haven't really ever talked about this or thought about it, you know, very much. So, but I hit this place to where I had been working at something for so long, you know, as far as practicing every single day, hours and hours and hours to where, you know, I knew that I was working as hard as I could. Like I couldn't practice more hours. I couldn't go out and gig more. I couldn't teach more. I mean, I was so drenched in music to where I couldn't go any deeper into it, you know? And there was a certain place to where it's like, I knew that by doing everything that I could, that this is it. Like, this is what it amounts to. And so there wasn't a fear of failure at that point, because I knew deep down in my bones that that this is as hard as I can work, you know, like this is as much as I can give it. And I'm giving it that. And there was kind of a peace that came to that, to where it's like, if I just do this for the rest of my life, which is give this everything I got. And I get the return that I'm getting now, which is teaching students, playing bars, maybe getting opened up for, you know, a cool act every once in a while when they come through town. Like at that point, I was fine with that. You know, I mean, I could have did that, you know, the next 70 years and been good. I don't know if at any point I would have gotten burnt out or, you know, decided I wanted to change, you know, paces or whatever else. But there's something that's really interesting that happens about your creative confidence or your confidence in what you're doing, that if you know that you're giving it everything you got, you know, then there's a way of going to bed at night in a different way. You lay your head down differently, you know, and that's been one of the things that I think I've been into the most. And when I talk to other students, like when I teach this music business class, I'm like, you know, now's the time, man. You're not promised tomorrow. So if you want this job that you're talking about, or want to create this company or start this production thing or whatever this, you know, thing that is this life you want to live, now's the time, dude. And ain't nobody going to talk you into it but yourself, you know? So like, and nobody cares if you win or lose but yourself, you know, like we all are pulling for you, but we got our own stuff going on. So if you really want it, you know, I'm telling you right now, it's up to you, you know, and that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing, you know, but here are the tools and the trades that you need to have for sure on lockdown. You can't be a mess with your money. You know, you can't just not have a clue how much you're making and how much you're spending and everything and expect stuff to just like magically fall in your lap. You know, you got to be financially literate. You know, even if you're rubbing pennies together, you need to know that it's two with one on the way. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's a big deal, you know. And another huge part of it is, you know, this idea that if you get in this headspace of your intentions are right and you're creatively and, you know, you're manifesting your own destiny in this kind of way, then it's just a matter of time before it's your time to do whatever your life is supposed to do. And you work as hard as you can, but there's no promise that you're going to be rich or famous or anything like this. But like, I can guarantee you something will happen that right in this moment, never in your wildest dreams did you think would happen, you know, and then the next year something will happen, you know, but you have to also kind of keep your ear to the ground and be very vulnerable and willing to change. Because, you know, with technology and everything else, you know, you can't be someone who's like, you know, not willing to roll with the punches and keep up with, you know, where the speed of everything is. So, but there's this, I'm kind of getting to this point in a long-winded way, but there's this place you can get to where you're free. You're free in your creative heart and soul. You're free in, you know, in the way you live your life, knowing that like I'm busting it, I'm giving it all I got, and it's moving forward. And the only failure that's going to happen is going to be lessons that are going to make me more successful, you know, to not have that happen again. So you're willing to be more vulnerable and take more chances because, you know, you start looking around, you're like, nobody else is working as hard as I am. You know, and you start, you know, kind of going, okay, well, I mean, the last time I took a chance, like something good happened. Maybe I'll take another chance a little bit deeper and see what happens. And you take another chance. And I mean, it's like a reason I'm in the band, dude. Zach called and said, hey, man, I want you to open up for my band because your band's really killing it. And then I want you to play keys in my band. And at the time, I didn't really play keys, dude. I mean, the whole reason why I'm in the Zach Brown band is because I basically faked it until I made it. You know, I told him, I was like, oh my God, dude, this is where I tell him that I don't really play keys, you know?
Right.
But at the same time, I knew that all I did was play music. And so if he sent me the songs, then I would learn those songs. And then over the next year, all I would do was play piano every single day, all day long until I got where I was better at it. Until at a certain point, I would just catch up to where they thought I was, you know?
Right. Yeah.
And that's what happened, you know? Yeah, pretty wild. because I could have easily have been like, yeah, when you see me playing piano on stage, those are the only songs I know. I don't really play piano. I just play it to make it look like I know what I'm doing. And he would have been like, oh, damn. Well, okay. That's cool.
Yeah.
Just open up for us, instead of like next thing I know, I'm on stage with them. It's just sometimes you just got to go for it, man.
Gosh, just the nuggets that's in that story right there. That's huge. Just unpacking that, like how many students you hesitate. They just don't take that step, but like you did, and you went for it. And your word, like such a key word for you. The whole night has been hustle. How you have that, it's just ingrained in you. It's what.
The work ethic thing, man, is something that I learned from my parents and stuff. But it's also this thing of coming from the family that I came from. I mean, my family were farmers, like cotton farmers. Before me, my grandma was one of 12. All of her brothers and sisters picked cotton in order to like live, as a family. And they lived in a house they called the Rat House. It had like basically there were parts of it that had like a dirt floor, And this was my grandmother, this was like my mom and then her mom. I mean, it wasn't
it's not like
15 people ago,
20 generations ago.
And then my on the other side of my family, they're all mill workers, man. They worked in the mill and they earned a decent living and just got by, barely got by kind of thing. And but like they were all people who were like, you got to get out and feed the chickens, there ain't nobody going to do it for you kind of thing. And so there was this kind of long line of people who are survivors, because hustling now is like to earn a living and everything. Back in the day, it was like surviving, you hustled because it wasn't about earning money, really. It was about like making sure you have food that you created yourself and all of this, So I guess I just come from a long line of, hustlers or survivors kind of thing, and I'm super grateful for that though, man. I mean, I definitely know the value of $1 and I know the value of hard work. I mean, when it comes to hard work, man, I have had every crappy job you can think of, dude. I mean, I picked up rocks for a living. Like off a side of a hill for a whole summer, me and this other dude picked up rocks and I got paid to do that. It's like you go to holding your guitar in your hand in front of 20,000 people at Fenway. And then you think back like, man, when I was 17 years old, I was picking up rocks for a living,
rock and roll.
This is way better. This is way better.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Oh,
that's a cool story.
Like selfishly, we could probably talk. I feel like we're around the campfire. We're just chatting, just hanging out. Like, this is phenomenal. But I mean, we're an hour and 42 minutes in. You got your family. You got to get ready for your little ones tomorrow morning. I don't want to keep you much longer. I do, but I don't. Just a professional.
Well, we'll just have to do it again, man. Sometime down the road, dude. I mean, obviously you can tell I don't mind talking. Oh,
I love it. And actually, the other thing too is I think, like I kind of had it jotted down in my mind that the origin story. There's something for that for teachers. I'd love to unpack further with you. I really think like that's something huge that, just encouraging teachers to share their origin story. There's something there. So I know your creative juices will flow. I think when you said
that's the whole idea, man. I mean,
jumped up in my spirit.
The next thing that I'm up to is really building out this connecting to your calling thing. I mean, it's going to be something that'll end up being like, I got plans to write a book. So like when I would come to the Pete and C conference in a year from now, there'd be a book that's like, somewhat of a guideline to connecting, to your calling and stories that teachers have shared, along with like insight that I pull from all these different people that I know and put it into this, kind of short form book that's like an easy read and inspirational to kind of like resurge your ability to appreciate what you've done and all the work you put in to be who you are and all of that and the power that teaching has so I really think it's broader than that. I mean I think it applies to creative people, young people who are looking for like, what's my purpose, or whatever. But for right now, I want to keep it in the lane of the teachers, because I feel like it's, what my calling is, can be completely honest, So I'm really trying to think as big as I can about taking the whole idea of connecting to your calling and turning it into something that is more of in a perfect world, there might be a conference that I host that teachers can come to, and they can, and it can be creditable and, and whatnot. But the whole thing would be about, having other speakers, not only myself, but other speakers that are talking about, all of these things that kind of don't get mentioned maybe, and really having it leave to be, once a year, there's this like kind of retreat that's really to get everybody charged back up, kind of thing. And, so, right now I'm
awesome.
kind of throwing it all up against the wall and seeing what sticks,
Yeah.
But so far, all signs are pointing to, every time I do the speech, it feels right. And then when I talk about it, other people are like, yeah, man, there's something to that,
Yeah.
So, yeah, man, I mean, and, and to be completely honest, man, my goal with all of this stuff is to form relationships that are genuine with people like yourselves and us do it together. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not looking for at the end of this thing for a trophy for myself or anything like that. If like, it's going to take a tribe to get all of this stuff happening, and everybody has to be involved in it because it's community based in the first place.
Yeah.
So if you're going out and you're, inspiring people to share their story and their origin, then, like, that's awesome. It's like, that's the point of the whole thing, is to kind of create, of overall vibration, or kind of connectivity. So, man, fingers crossed, dude.
That's awesome. I love it.
Because that whole building, community is important, because that's, building those connections. We try and do that with the students, working with the coworkers, and like you said, kind of everybody help pull each other up when needed. Yeah.
So, I mean, here's kind of like a nail to hang your hat on, for this conversation, to end on, is that, like, technology is amazing. The fact that we're able to do this right here, right now, like when I was in high school, this did not exist, so this is amazing that we can connect with, you guys and other people and have these conversations that can be recorded and lived and, resurfaced and all of this. Ultimately, the human experience, though, is about that tangible connection with each other, so we're doing it in this way that's virtual now, but we're still having these conversations. The more technology moves along, the kind of more it removes us from having, this deeper connection within each other, like being vulnerable in front of each other, being able to be trusting of each other, in these vulnerable situations. And I think that the more that we can fight for humanity as a whole, specifically young kids, to have this relationship that is vibrant and personable with their parents, starting there, with their teachers, with their peers, through sports, through clubs, through education, through the way they're taught. It doesn't have to be sit down, shut up, listen to what I got to say, and then go to another place and do that same thing. There's so much more to the human experience, and technology can be used in all of this. You can have a speaker come into your classroom and watch a screen at 5 years old of somebody being an author who's visiting your classroom from Colorado when you're in Georgia or whatever else. And it'd be amazing. And it'd be really inspiring. And so it's not necessarily that screen time or technology gets in the way. It's just like, it's the fact that it takes over from the actual human experience, and that's one of the things that I'm kind of fighting for is for like technology to move along and push us into this way to where we use it for our best and where we can make things faster. We can, have more information at our fingertips, be connected with each other more. I mean, the fact that I can FaceTime my mom and dad with my kids, or the fact I can FaceTime my mom, my wife and my kids when I'm on the road is amazing. There's such a difference between talking to a 5-year-old on the phone, and being like, hey, look at me, it's completely different. So it's amazing. Yeah. But at the end of the day, like the thing that I want to, kind of hang my hat on is this idea of, man, we're just all so much better off if we care about each other and we connect with each other and we trust each other and we're a little bit vulnerable in front of each other. And, it's like, that's the human experience. Yeah. And the more we get removed from that, the colder things get, and the darker things get, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And life is too short for all of that, man.
Yeah. I mean, I have early morning duty at school. I'm in the parking lot. I'm like one of the Walmart greeters of the school, I always say. And sometimes that drives me nuts. You see, like, kids will get off the bus and there'll be 5 kids getting off the bus and they all have headphones or earbuds in, they're on their phone and they're not talking with each other. And it's like, why? Yeah, because that was our thing when I grew, like I said, elementary school in the 70s, high school in the 80s. You sit on the bus, you talk to people because you might not be in the same class with them. I went to a bigger school district.
Yeah.
So that might be the only time I see my neighbors and my friends is on the bus. And, with the communicating, seeing the kids. My buddy and I, we have the parking lot. Kids come in. We're always like, hey, how's it going? Wave to the parents. Ask the kids how they're doing. If we know they had an activity the night before, how'd it go? And keep that
totally
going.
Man. I mean, I don't think it's going away. I mean, because that kid could be talking to like a girl, or or a guy or whoever that they're enamored with, like it's their new best friend. So this communication that they're having in our eyes, that we're seeing pass by, is like, that's some meaningless kind of thing. But there might be like really being like, dude, have you listened to this new song that I'm listening to right now? It's amazing. And it's kind of like this interaction, but you still have to like take those things and set them down and actually like do a little bit of this too, for it to all make sense. Or you have to step into their zone when it comes to understanding how kids communicate now via, messaging and things like that. And, kind of realize like that's them sitting around, a garage, when they're at home, we used to go and hang out in my buddy's garage after school and just rip, just have fun, joke around, we might play pool or something. And a lot of kids, are basically doing that on phones right now, where they're just joking around and they're like goofing off with each other and everything else. So I try to put myself in a place to where I respect like their world and their life without thinking like, you guys need to get off the phone all the time, but at the same time, there has to be a time and place to where you put it down and you get down to like being a human, and then get back into the advantages that technology has, so somewhere in there is in moderation is a sweet spot of growth,
It's a good way of looking at it.
Yeah. I just don't want to be that curmudgeon-y, guy who's like, it was killer in, 97, or whatever else, I'm trying to, cause it's easy, I think it's really interesting to think that, I mean, I grew up in a neighborhood where I could just go and ride my bike freely at a young age, and my parents didn't know where I was and everything else. And like, there's a part of me that's like, I wonder if that even happens anymore. You know what I mean? Or are you, digitally tied, to a tether to where if you get to do that, then you have a cell phone on you, or whatever, and maybe, but the thing about it is that there's one thing for sure, and that's change, so. I'm sure that with the way I dressed when I was, 15, 16 years old, my granddad was looking at me like, you got ripped jeans on purpose, like that makes no sense, and now we're looking at kids on, their phones and like, and not understanding that's just them hanging out. So, I mean, I guess I try to give it all of its benefits. It's all like in due time, you know, when is it right? You know?
Yeah.
Right.
You know?
Yeah,
well, man, I feel like this is going to be one of those kind of things to where, I'm going to have to say bye or else I'm going to keep talking. So
hey, well, I know it's been great. And I'm going to hold you to maybe we'll have to do it again another time.
Yeah, dude.
We'll
I'm down.
this has been awesome. Truly appreciate it.
Yeah, man. And I'd love to flip it around and interview you guys the next time we do this, man. Cause I think, you know, I would love to hear from your point of view, what your thoughts are on some of the things that I'm interested in, you know, in doing. And it might be cool to have like bring some other people in on this as well. And have, I mean, I don't know how many people we can, fit in on one session, but do a little bit of a round table on something would be cool, you know? Yeah,
we could get about, I think, 10 to 15 people on here.
Oh,
so, we could easily do the back end, but if you want to run it, like we can set that up, man. Let's definitely do it.
Yeah, dude. I mean, that'd be really cool to bring some teachers on and just ask some questions, man. I'm really interested in finding out what it's like, you know, kind of in the rooms, you know. I get a chance to talk to a lot of people, but every time I talk to teachers, I get new information, you know, so it would be cool to, you know, find out, you know, what they feel about, like, are they connected or not, and what their experience is like with their origin story. You know, it might be really cool to kind of spark that. Well, what we've been talking about is, you know, kind of something that has the ability to connect, you know. Let's try it out.
All right. I like
definitely
it.
up for that.
Yeah. Well, man, dude, this has been killer. I appreciate you guys a bunch, man. And
thank you.
Appreciate you.
I appreciate what you guys do, man. Thank you for all you do for the kids and the community and the families and everything. You know, I have a lot of respect for you guys, man. And also, you do an awesome podcast, and you're, you know, helping other people get understand the power of connectivity and technology and all that stuff, which I'm way into that as well. So I was beefing you guys up before we got on.
I know
here.
you did it again.
I got to beef you guys up too. They missed the pregame. The pregame was as good as this whole thing, you know.
That was awesome. Hey, well, you know, I want to take the words out of one of our colleagues, one of our board members, talk about how you're taking that rock star status and you're pouring it into education as an educator and into educators. Thank you truly so much just for being you.
Yeah, man. I really appreciate it. That means a lot. You couldn't give me a better compliment, man.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. You know, when you're a little groggy in the morning, make sure your daughters know it's our fault. I apologize, but because they're not going to be groggy in the morning.
This is going to help. Right. My students are going to appreciate you for this, because tomorrow, like, we have our life skills kids come around on Thursday's coffee cart day, and they have these giant donuts, and I get the custard donut with chocolate icing, and I normally drink decaf. I'm going full caffeine tomorrow. I already apologized to my students, and I'm going to be all wound up. So this will kind of mellow me out a little bit for the kids.
Nice,
I won't be full bore at them. This will kind of buffer them a bit.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, man. Well, it's great meeting you guys, man, again. Let's stay in touch.
Definitely.
All right, we'll do.
All right.
Peace. Take it easy.
Take care.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
All right. See you. Oh my word. What an amazing time. My gosh. It's like we're just like one of the guys just hanging out. Again, it could have been a campfire, you know. Oh my word. Just amazing. So cool.
Yeah. I wish we had more time. I really do. Because it was, I enjoyed it.
Yep. So, and I'll just say this to people to know, Coy's in the background. If you need to go, you won't mess anything up, Coy. If you do have to roll, you can go ahead and end it. There he goes. What just amazing time, Coy. Thank you so much. Truly amazing. Having you here, the stories. I definitely look forward to us doing some things down the road. That'd be awesome. Get a lot of teachers in the mix. So very cool. So, all right. Well, I think it's time for us to roll the closing bumper and thank our sponsors. What do you think?
Thank the sponsors making this happen. And Noonan chimed in. We had some comments. Thank her because she helped organize this, and from bringing in the keynotes to setting this up for the pod. Thank you, Ann, because without your help, we wouldn't have had this great session tonight.
Yeah, she's
and everyone
behind
else
the scenes, a
comments.
Superstar. Yeah, very cool. All right, here we go. PAECT and the PAECT Pod would like to take this opportunity to to say thank you to our corporate council sponsors. Thank you to ClassLink, Max Cases, Go Guardian, and Bloom. Thank you to Sam Labs, DRC, and EduSpire. We appreciate all these organizations partnering with PAECT to help us to advance the education technology in Pennsylvania, which in essence helps students. We look forward to seeing you at PETC 2023. Thank you so much to the listeners. PAECT is a phenomenal organization because our members are amazing. All right. Let's officially close it out. We're at 2 hours. Our students are going to know we're a little groggy in the morning, but ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us this whole time. Again, thank you to Coy.
Thank you.
Thank you to Ann setting it up. We truly appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you to everyone who is watching us remotely. People who contributed during the broadcast. We appreciate your participation.
Yeah. And if you're watching this as it's recorded on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, wherever you may see it, email pod@paect.org, and we'll be able to get any questions, Coy, that you might have. So we truly appreciate you listening to the PAECT Pod, because PAECT, we are
the voice of EdTech in Pennsylvania
and beyond.
Have a good night, everybody.
All right. Take care, everybody.